Today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the next writing assignment in our English 002 class, Transition English. This is for Unit 3. It's called Discovering Implied Meaning. And really what you're writing here is a personal narrative. And it's more than just, here's my day, kind of blog or journal kind of thing. This is something that changed your perspective or changed your life. And we have these kinds of serious epiphanies rather rarely in our lives, but when they happen, they're worth thinking about, they're worth contemplating, they're worth telling other people about. This can be anything from realizing that your partner is the one for you, or figuring out what you want to be when you grow up. Any kind of epiphany, and an epiphany is just that realization that, oh, this is the thing. Um, we call it a eureka moment. Sometimes we call it a life-changing event. Oftentimes they're not positive. Um, Folks who have gone through cancer, folks who have lost a loved one, folks who have been seriously injured or had a major medical issue. Those are all epiphany moments too, because you count your time from before this and after this. In my family, we have my mom had colon cancer, and everything just about we do. Oh, that was before mom got sick, and it's this huge mark in your life. And you think about something or someone or an idea that has changed or patterned your life for you. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to tease out what is important and what is extraneous. So I'm going to walk through a little bit about this assignment so that you have a better idea of what you're expected to write about. You do have a writing assignment sheet in that Unit 3 page. Scroll down to the handouts, I put it in there. And the writing assignment is a multi-paragraph essay. And it's about the moment that changed everything. And you have a reading to go along with this. It's Audre Lorde's 4th of July. It's a piece about something that happened to her late in her teenage life. She and her family went to Washington, D.C., and this is before the era of civil rights. She was she was African American, her whole family. Um, the reason they were going to Washington, D.C. is because her, I think it's her cousin, was graduating high school, and everybody got to go on this senior trip basically to Washington, D.C. But because her cousin was African American, she couldn't stay in the hotel with everybody else. This is how strange things were back then. She and her family went then later, and I forget if they stayed with family or whatever, but her big realization in this is that discrimination was rampant. And her parents' reaction to this was basically to pretend like it didn't happen, pretend like it didn't matter to them, which she finds frustrating. But you can also see their point in a lot of ways. They had these young girls with them, and they wanted to make sure that they had a good time and that they learned a lot. And so they went on with their life and didn't combat or confront what was going on. Audre Lorde spent most of her life combating and confronting about lots and lots of civil rights issues. And so this is a point in her life where things changed for her. She went from being naive and thinking that everything was fine, as her parents kind of wanted her to think, and realizing that there was a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work to do, honestly, for race reconciliation. And so that's her moment, realizing just what she was up against simply by the color of her skin. And maybe your epiphany moment isn't quite that dramatic or that drastic, but maybe it is. There are lots of movements against equality that we don't know too much about unless we happen to be in that category of folks who other people are trying to oppress. It's difficult to be African American and female and gay, and all kinds of little markers that we have that end up running our lives for us based on other people's expectations. And so for this paper, I would like for you to try to show us what it feels like or what it felt like to make that realization, this moment that changed everything. There is a worksheet for you to practice on. It's not an assignment per se, but if you've never actually written a personal narrative before, or you've never written something like this, it'll be helpful for you to look through it. It's at the bottom, towards the bottom of our Unit 3 stuff. It's called Show Me, Don't Tell Me, and it's a worksheet that's developed in our department, and it's not mine. It's one of the other instructors, and it's really good. One of the things about this paper, and I'm just going to go through the handout now for just a few minutes. Multi-paragraph essay, we're talking at least 3 paragraphs. I would prefer 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. It just depends on how long it takes you to actually tell your story. But one of the things you're going to have to do with this is to keep in mind what you learned and make sure everything that you put in this story points to that. I'm a big one for rabbit trails and departures. And it's easy when it's something that's this important to you to get caught up in all the little tiny details that kind of grow up around it. My advice to you is to write it all out. Basically, get it out of your system and then go in and look at what you have and pick out the things that are most important, the things that will help your reader understand what you learned and how you learned it. You're going to need an introduction that hooks your reader's interest, that shows us where you're coming from and what you're doing and how this works. But there are lots and lots of ways to start a paper, start a story. I have put up on Blackboard in the handout section tips for introductions, stuff you probably already know, but sometimes it's nice to have, oh yeah, I can do that. Ask a question or make a big statement, all kinds of ways you can hook your reader with that first sentence. You don't need to reference Audre Lorde's story. Her story is there for you to read and respond to tacitly, okay, without saying it out loud, basically. It's a starting off point. It's a place for you to go for inspiration. This is how she's doing it. It's a much longer piece than you need to write, so don't let that scare you. But the thesis statement here, this idea that this is what you learned, I want you to keep that written at the top of whatever page you're working on, but it doesn't need to actually be in your paper. Okay, you don't have to say it out loud, but you need to say enough about it that we could figure it out. And that's a little harder than it looks. Make sure that your paragraphs are actual paragraphs. They have main points. Those main points are separate, and that everything about that particular main point is in that paragraph. Organization is a big deal once you get into multi-paragraph essays, and this is your first one, really. So keep that in mind as you go along. The NROC stuff for Unit 3 will walk you through a bunch of that. When you get to your first rough draft, it'll have the normal here, do this section, do this section, do this section. Make sure you follow those steps. Do what they ask you to do. Don't tell me what you're going to do, just do it, okay? Make sure that each of those paragraphs has a separate point. Make sure that that point is fully developed. I can follow it, and I don't know you at all, so that's helpful. Also, make sure that you have a conclusion, that you have kind of the wrap it up and tell us what to do with this information portion of your paper. It can be a separate paragraph, probably should be a separate paragraph from your actual narrative, and leave us a final thought. There is a grading rubric on the second page of your handout, the writing assignment. It's a narrative essay. You have 5 elements. The narrative element is, this is a story. There are lots of ways to get at a story. Most of us don't usually tell a story from beginning to end linearly. Some folks do. I have a hard time with that. I forget things that are important. I have to fill them in later. With writing, you can choose your organization. You can choose your order. If there's something that happens at the end that you think would be more important to tell people up front, then by all means, put it up front. Make sure that you have a significant personal event with interesting conflict, vivid details, and finally a resolution. What did you learn from this? The implied thesis statement is the second piece, and this is that important thing that you learned. You may say some of that out loud, write some of it down for us, but you don't have to. Okay. Make sure that you have your supporting ideas, your supporting sentences in each paragraph. That means in your introduction, in your conclusion, in the story that comes in between. Make sure that your paragraphs are developed well, that you say everything you need to say and nothing more, and that your grammar and punctuation shows development from the last paper. If I have to mark the same mistake every time you write a paper, then you're not learning from that. Make sure that you are paying attention to things like periods and commas. Make sure that you're paying attention to your subject-verb agreement. Make sure that if something needs an S, it has it. If it's past tense, put it in past tense. I do have a couple of other videos I'm going to pop up here. One is specifically on writing narratives. One is on transitions and time markers, which are very important for writing a story like this. And then one that is not on your list is I'm going to walk through the handout on writing conventions. Things that most college professors believe that you already know. So you should make sure that you know them. Anyway, if you have questions about the writing assignment, I'm just an email away. Make sure that you send things in before you post things. It's really frustrating for you and for me to have a question come up that I've already talked about on your paper, but we'll work on things. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see how this goes. Remember that this is week 4 on the work that we're doing, but this is unit 3, so that's kind of how strange things get around here. So anyway, let me know if you have questions. Hope you have a great day.